The manhwa opens with someone shouting at the female protagonist, questioning who goes to college just to farm, and whether all the support given to her was meant for this. The protagonist attempts to explain herself, asking what is wrong with her choice and reminding them that farming represents the future strength of the country. However, her words only fuel her mother's anger, as her mother dismisses the idea entirely, declaring that she does not care about such matters and questioning why the future of the country should concern her daughter at all. Reflecting on this, the protagonist wonders how her mother is doing now, realizing that her mother would never have imagined that the daughter she once scolded for entering the agriculture department would go on to spark an agricultural revolution in another world. The scene shifts to a grand setting filled with sparkling chandeliers, beautiful flowers, and vibrant colors. Elegantly dressed people in gowns and tuxedos fill the hall, creating an atmosphere of luxury and celebration. At the center of it all stands a man glaring intensely at her. In this moment, he declares that he intends to break off their engagement. This leaves Lyanna utterly confused, as she struggles to comprehend what is happening. Only moments ago, she had been in a break room, grinding coffee beans, when she heard a strange popping sound and felt something unusual. Suddenly, a sharp pain surged through her head, disorienting her completely. As she tries to process the situation, her fiancé assumes she is pretending to be ill once again to escape the confrontation, dismissing her condition as a cheap trick. Finally, she questions whether he is truly Crown Prince David. Instead of answering with concern, he accuses her of pretending to be insane and urges her to stop her hypocritical behavior. He explains that their engagement was arranged under His Majesty's wishes, though he had been reluctant from the very beginning. This revelation shocks her deeply. She quickly realizes that she is now inside the very novel she had read in her previous life. The story revolves around a girl from another world who becomes a saint, fitting the typical romance fantasy narrative. That girl, Lyanna, is currently standing beside Crown Prince David, linking arms with him. As the protagonist of the story, Lyanna possesses a charming and quirky personality that wins everyone over. In contrast, the villainess who constantly criticizes and mistreats her is none other than Lyanna herself. Although regaining the memories of both her past and present lives should be a blessing, it instead becomes a source of despair. She cannot understand why she had to become the villainess of the story. Even with her memories restored, she feels powerless to change the course of events. This moment marks the beginning of her downfall as Lyanna Vance. However, something feels off to her. She recalls that in the original story, her engagement was broken due to her repeated mistreatment of Lyanna. Yet at this point in time, she has not insulted Lyanna, mocked her lack of etiquette, or ridiculed her for wearing the same dress. Despite this, Crown Prince David proceeds to call off the engagement. Furthermore, this day is supposed to be her 20th birthday, the day she was meant to receive a proposal from him. Instead, everything collapses before her eyes. Later, inside a carriage, Lyanna is overwhelmed with frustration and despair. She questions why her memories had to return at such a critical moment. With the engagement already broken, she feels that there is nothing left she can do to alter her fate. It seems inevitable that she is doomed. Upon returning home, her father reacts with anger and disappointment, calling her disgraceful. When she tries to speak to him, he coldly declares that he will erase her name from the family. He offers her one final chance to say anything she wishes, as this will be the last time she has such an opportunity. In the original story, Lyanna stubbornly resisted at this point, ultimately provoking her father's fury and being cast out onto the streets. But now, with the knowledge from her past life, she understands the harsh reality of this world. Living without money is nearly impossible. Medical care is extremely expensive, and commoners often have no choice but to rely on shamans, whose treatments are crude and unpleasant. She remembers clearly that without money, one cannot even afford to fall sick. Determined to avoid such a fate, she abandons her pride. She clasps her hands together and begins rubbing them nervously, begging her father not to throw her out. She promises to live quietly and behave properly from now on. Despite her desperate plea, her father merely smiles coldly before ordering the knights to remove her immediately. Without hesitation, the knights carry out his command, and just like that, Lyanna is thrown out of her home. In the span of only a few hours, her entire life crumbled. Standing alone, abandoned and helpless, she realizes that everything she once had is gone. Overcome with grief, she cries out for her father, but her voice is left unanswered. She can clearly see that she is completely ruined. Overcome with desperation, Lyanna cries out to her father, realizing that she has suddenly become a commoner. She cannot comprehend how she is supposed to survive in such a penniless state. For a moment, she considers clinging to the door, wondering if she should keep waiting there until someone opens it again. As she struggles with these thoughts, someone calls out to her, urging her to come their way. Turning toward the voice, she sees her nanny standing nearby, accompanied by a large carriage. Confused and slightly hopeful, Lyanna asks where they are going and whether her father might have arranged a place for her. For a brief moment, she wonders if her desperate tears may have softened his heart after all. However, her nanny quickly dispels that hope, explaining that the master had only ordered her to send Lyanna away. Despite this, the nanny could not bring herself to abandon her completely. She suggests that, for now, they should head to her hometown, where the local lord is known to be kind, making it a relatively safe place. Once inside the carriage, Lyanna sinks into her thoughts. She feels utterly lost. In the end, she has been cast out exactly as the original story had described. Now, she is left questioning what she is supposed to do next. Letting out a quiet sigh, she listens as her nanny gently tries to comfort her, urging her not to lose heart. The nanny believes that the master understands it is not truly Lyanna's fault, and that this may simply be a temporary measure, a way to keep her hidden until public opinion settles. However, Lyanna cannot bring herself to believe such reassurance. In the latter part of the novel she once read, her character does not appear again. To her, this suggests that this moment marks the true end of her story. She imagines a grim possibility that after being cast out without money, she might have fallen ill and died alone in some forgotten place. The thought sends a chill through her as she realizes how horrifying such a fate would be. She cannot help but think that if her memories had returned just a little earlier, she might have been able to change everything. Perhaps she could have avoided this outcome entirely. Then again, that would mean she would not have been abandoned by Crown Prince David. Reflecting on him, she finds little comfort in that idea. In her mind, he is insensitive, arrogant, and self-righteous, the very embodiment of selfishness. She reasons that it is precisely because of his nature that he fell for Sienna, a woman bold enough to speak of equality and challenge him in ways no one else had. Sienna had even struck him, becoming the first person to do so, which only deepened his fascination. Lyanna concludes that while such a man might seem appealing within the pages of a novel, living alongside someone like him in reality would likely drive a person to madness. Even if she had not been cast aside, she doubts her life would have been a happy one. With this realization, she begins to shift her perspective. Instead of viewing her situation as pure misfortune, she considers the possibility that this could be her freedom, a chance to finally live a life of her own choosing. With that thought in mind, she gradually drifts off to sleep. Sometime later, her nanny gently wakes her, informing her that they have arrived. This is as far as she can accompany her. Before parting, the nanny embraces her tightly and apologizes for everything. Lyanna reassures her, expressing gratitude instead. She understands that even bringing her this far was a significant risk, as it could have invited her father's wrath. The nanny tells her that if they ever meet again, she will make sure to repay Lyanna's kindness. Standing there, at the end of her journey with the only person who showed her compassion, Lyanna prepares to step forward into an uncertain future, completely alone. While the nanny asks her not to worry, she assures her that one day, when she becomes useful, the Duke will come looking for her again. Lyanna, however, thinks that hearing such words from the nanny somehow makes everything feel even more bitter. She cannot help but wonder if they truly did not leave her here to prepare for something later. With that, the nanny says that she will be off now. Lyanna, thinking internally, reflects that it is her nanny of all people, and she would not do something like that. Perhaps she has simply become too sensitive because of the broken engagement. She decides that she will try to think positively. At the very least, she has managed to avoid sleeping on bare ground, and that alone is something worth acknowledging. However, when she opens the door, she is immediately taken aback, wondering what exactly she is looking at. She knows that the nanny went out of her way to help her, but honestly, the condition of this house is simply too much to accept. She now looks like a complete beggar. Once, she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, and yet, in a single instant, everything has come to this. A drop of water suddenly falls onto her, and it is unbearably cold. She looks around, realizing that this is what real life is like. Life is a battlefield. The house is nothing but a wreck, and she does not even have food to eat. Even so, she refuses to sit there and starve to death. A few months later, someone is heard saying that someone is actually living in their rundown house. They claim that it is the Duke's daughter, yet the man admits that he has not seen even a trace of her. The woman beside him suggests that she might already be dead. However, they soon notice a chicken, and as it is being chased, they assume that she must still be alive. At the same time, they begin to wonder if that chicken looks like one that had run away from their own place. Meanwhile, Lyanna peeks from the side, thinking about what they mean by calling it their chicken. In her mind, anything that comes onto her land now belongs to her, and there is no way she is going to give it up. It is her precious source of protein. If anyone were to ask for the chicken, she would firmly refuse. However, before she can even think further, the girl with the woman points out that there is a person over there, and questions whether that shabby-looking figure is truly a lady. The mother, in response, admonishes the child for speaking in such a manner about a lady and urges her to apologize quickly. Lyanna, feeling utterly embarrassed, gathers herself and asks them if they would like to have some sweet potatoes, not knowing what else she should do in such an awkward situation. Fortunately, the climate here is quite similar to what she was used to back in Korea. In other words, it is perfect for stable crops. The plants here are familiar to her, and she makes use of that knowledge. She takes out a sweet potato and eats it, and she also gives one to the guest who arrived earlier. The man, upon eating the sweet potato, reacts with astonishment and wonders if such delicious things truly exist in the neighborhood. This reaction causes Lyanna to question whether he genuinely does not know about it. The man insists that it is exceptionally good and asks if he can have another. She allows him, of course, but then curiously asks how much apples cost here. He replies that apples are sold for 3 gold coins. She acknowledges this calmly, but then a spark appears in her eyes as she realizes something important. She concludes that nothing in this world comes for free, and therefore her stewed sweet potatoes will be sold for 6. It has already been 4 years since she arrived in this area. While someone is working in the field, they point toward her and remark that the red-roofed Lyanna has adapted at an astonishing speed and has achieved so much. Of course, her success has not come easily. 2 years earlier, someone had pointed out that relying on sweet potatoes alone would not be enough, and that she needed to decide on a new crop. Reflecting on that, she remembers how the villagers sell apples the moment they ripen. She then resolves that the next big venture she will pursue will be Apple's beautiful apples. In her mind, she criticizes the people around her, believing that they do not understand the first thing about farming. She questions whether they realize how much hard work and knowledge are required to grow perfect apples. However, she also knows that such effort yields extraordinary results. When people see her apples, they are overwhelmed to the point of tears, as they have never witnessed such large and beautiful apples in their lives. Lyanna takes pride in this, confidently acknowledging that she is indeed quite the farmer. However, one of the villagers suggests that such a magnificent apple deserves to be offered to the lord of the land. This immediately irritates her. She cannot understand why the lord should be involved at all. She glares at them, thinking about how and why they could even consider giving away something that rightfully belongs to her. She mentally protests that it is her apple in questions who gave them the authority to give it away, urging them to stop immediately. At that moment, someone arrives and questions what all the commotion is about. One of the men respectfully presents the apple and asks the lord to take a look. Lyanna is surprised to discover that the lord is actually an elderly woman. The lord examines the fruit with disbelief, questioning whether such an enormous object can truly be an apple, and wondering what kind of magic could have produced it. Lyanna confidently responds that there is nothing mysterious about it, asserting that she is simply a genius farmer. This statement prompts the lady to recall something, and she remarks that Lyanna is the daughter of the Duke Pond. Hearing this, Lyanna becomes slightly taken aback and begins to question how the woman knows about her. The lady replies that, of course, there is no way she would not know. She explains that she has even received reports about how Lyanna has been making a living through farming here. Naturally, she had assumed those reports were all lies. This immediately irritates Lyanna, as she realizes that the lady had believed she was merely hiring others to do the work. Although she admits that such a thing could have been possible, she firmly knows that she has done all of this herself. As Lyanna begins to stroll away, she reflects on how the lady, despite knowing her identity as the Duke's daughter, has not done a single thing for her. Because of that, she turns back and states that the price will be 1 gold coin. The lady questions whether Lyanna truly intends to charge her for the apple. Lyanna confidently confirms this, explaining that the apple is like her own child. Furthermore, due to this year's poor harvest, she has only managed to grow 20 of these exceptional fruits. This revelation shocks the lady, who immediately questions whether Lyanna is claiming to have 20 more apples of the same quality. Lyanna calmly confirms that she does. The lady then presses further, asking if Lyanna has not considered that offering them might earn her a reward far greater than a single gold coin. However, Lyanna dismisses the idea, making it clear that gambling is not something she believes in. The lady remarks that Lyanna is quite a bold young woman. She admits that she had originally expected Lyanna to come crying at the gates of her manor within a week. She then asks whether Lyanna is capable of growing other fruits as well. Lyanna confidently replies that she can, describing the peaches she grows as so sweet and tender that they practically burst in one's mouth. This vivid description causes the lady to react visibly, while Lyanna notices her interest and realizes just how tempting the idea sounds. Eventually, the lady proposes that she will hire Lyanna as the estate gardener, instructing her to grow fruit trees within the manor grounds. However, Lyanna immediately refuses, stating that she does not take subcontracted work. She believes that growing and selling the fruit herself is far more profitable. The lady questions how Lyanna intends to manage everything alone, pointing out that her family, the Duke's household, has completely cut ties with her and that she has no one to rely on. In response, Lyanna explains that this is precisely why the lady should invest in her. She expresses that she would appreciate it if the lady offered her protection, as someone without powerful backing becomes an easy target once they gain wealth. The lady, impressed by her audacity, acknowledges her confidence. Ultimately, she decides to trust Lyanna and instructs her butler to provide whatever Lyanna requests. She also orders that all the apples be collected from Lyanna's house, ensuring that not a single one is left behind. As a result, Lyanna sells all her apples for no less than 20 gold coins. The following year, she grows peaches that fetch an even higher price. Soon her fruits become so famous that neighboring lords begin competing for them through offerings, sponsorships, and purchase deals. She expands her operations by buying land, hiring workers, and raising livestock. At this point, she considers her life a resounding success and feels completely satisfied. Later, the lady remarks to Lyanna that, now that she thinks about it, the Crown Prince David, whom Lyanna had so bluntly rejected, has recently gotten married. She wonders if Lyanna feels any curiosity about the rest of his story, noting that, had he not been so fickle, Lyanna might have become queen. However, Lyanna shows no interest at all, as she values farming far too much to concern herself with such matters. It appears that her second life will conclude as that of a successful farmer. On this particular day, the harvest is even greater than the previous year. She plans to sell a portion of it to neighboring villages, while another portion she intends to share with the elderly Lady Lord. As she reflects on what she should cultivate next, she suddenly trips and falls to the ground. Confused, she looks back to see what caused her fall. To her surprise, she notices perfectly straight lines etched into the ground, forming elegant and flowing curves that resemble a hoe. She wonders why such a rare tool is present here, as she had believed she would never encounter one. In this world, everyone uses flower spades for farming, which makes her question why they would rely on such impractical tools when something far more efficient exists. Suddenly, the hoe begins to glow. Then, to her astonishment, it addresses her directly, asking whether she is its new master. Lyanna wonders if the tool had spoken in her past life. She would have been utterly shocked. However, in this world, magic is not unusual. Having perfectly adapted to this new life, she is not too surprised. Moreover, she cannot ignore this precious talking tool that she has found after 4 years. Without hesitation, she acknowledges herself as its master. Suddenly, the hoe begins to glow, and a mark is sealed onto her hand, signifying that a contract has been established. As she looks back at it, the tool transforms into a sword and introduces itself as Sam, stating that she should consider it an honor to be his 10th master. Lyanna immediately feels that something is wrong. She is certain that she had only picked up a simple hoe, so how could it suddenly become a sword? She is also confused about this claim of being the 10th master. Louis explains that recounting the full history of his creation would be far too long, even requiring 10 handkerchiefs to endure the tale, so he keeps it brief. This only makes Lyanna more curious about the so-called Britannia stone. Louis continues by revealing that he is a sword forged by the god of abundance over 3 days and nights. Abundance resides within him, which is why many have coveted him. However, he describes himself as a very clever sword, one who has only allowed himself to be wielded by those destined to become Empress. After 9 such masters, he had grown weary. More and more unqualified individuals sought to claim him, so he eventually hid himself in a humble form. Lyanna questions whether he is implying that the hoe she picked up was actually him. She finds it difficult to believe that she has encountered something so bizarre, and she wonders if there is any way to undo this situation. Louis immediately insists that his master has recognized his true worth, even when he was hidden in such a modest form. He praises her for possessing eyes that can see beauty, even in something as simple as a flower blooming in the mud. Internally, Lyanna reflects that she had merely picked it up because it was a hoe, Louis continues, declaring that she possesses the qualities of a ruler and should receive his blessing. Lyanna, however, insists that he is mistaken, as she considers herself nothing more than an ordinary farmer. Louis responds that her identity does not matter. Lyanna counters his argument by reminding him that he himself claimed to have remained hidden for a long time in search of a proper master, so he should have chosen someone brave, wise, and ambitious. Louis remains firm, stating that she possesses wisdom and humility, which are enough for him to recognize her as his master. Meanwhile, Lyanna simply wishes to return to tending her farm, finding the situation stubborn and troublesome. Eventually, she decides that it does not matter. A talking sword in a fantasy world is not such a big deal. Since she has no family and often feels bored, she resolves to treat Louis as a conversation partner for now. She agrees that they should get along. Louis expresses his desire for her to live a long life and keep him content until she reaches her grave, which Lyanna internally feels is a bit excessive. The scene then shifts to an old granny who mentions to Lyanna that something strange has been happening in the territory lately. Lyanna wonders what could be so unusual. The old woman explains that the trees and grasses have suddenly begun to grow exceptionally well, and even the Hoya plant in her office has bloomed for the first time in 7 years, which she finds astonishing. Lyanna attributes this to good sunlight and favorable weather, suggesting that perhaps divine intervention is at play, though she considers it one of those natural occurrences that simply happen from time to time. However, the old granny continues, noting even stranger events. Whenever a dog gives birth, there are always 8 puppies, and when hens lay eggs, they consistently produce double-yolked eggs. People have even started searching for normal eggs without double yolks for amusement. This leads the old granny to reflect deeply, wondering if all of this is not, in fact, very strange. Lyanna insists that everything is simply too good to be abandoned, and believes that she is merely a kind person. However, the old granny finds the situation increasingly suspicious. No matter how much she thinks about it, everything feels unnaturally strange. Meanwhile, Lyanna reflects internally that if she were in the old woman's position, she would simply feel grateful. Still, she cannot ignore the fact that the old granny is cautious by nature, yet she had trusted Lyanna almost immediately. Eventually, the old granny notices the bandages on Lyanna's hand and asks why she is wearing them and whether she is injured. Lyanna hesitates, wondering how she should explain the situation. She casually replies that she is not hurt at all and explains that while walking around the farm earlier, she picked up something strange. This immediately alarms the old granny, who anxiously asks if she has suffered from metal poisoning and urges her to take care of it quickly, warning that it could be fatal. Lyanna tries to reassure her, insisting once again that she is not injured. She explains that she has only acquired a strange tattoo, something she never even wanted. Finally, she reveals the mark to the old granny. The old granny responds calmly, telling her that it is fine, and instructs her to wrap it up again. However, almost immediately afterward, she complains of a sudden headache and asks Lyanna if she could leave for the day. Lyanna departs, feeling uneasy. She wonders whether it is right to leave the old woman alone just because she is unwell. Concerned, she decides that she will bring her some fresh vegetables the next day. When Lyanna returns home, she finds Louis waiting for her, clearly upset. She asks him why he seems so angry. Louis is furious, accusing her of shamelessly coming back after using another sword. This confuses Lyanna, as she cannot imagine who would use a sword like him to cut melons. She tries to explain that she could not carry a weapon in front of the Lord, so she had no choice but to leave him behind. She reasons that it would have been worse if he had ended up in the hands of a guard or abandoned on the ground. However, Louis refuses to accept her reasoning, declaring that no human should treat him in such a manner. In an attempt to calm him down, Lyanna begins to praise him, speaking sweetly about his qualities. Louis encourages her to continue, which makes her feel that the sword's behavior is rather unusual. She then picks him up and promises that next time she will carry him by her side and proudly boast about how impressive he is. Louis asks if she truly promises, and in that moment, Lyanna cannot help but feel that he resembles a living being. She wonders whether something like him could truly possess a soul. Not only can he speak, but he can also change his form freely and even emit light like a lantern. Despite everything, she still considers the hoe to be the most practical form. Changing the topic, Lyanna mentions that the Lord had spoken about something unusual. The territory has been flourishing recently, with livestock producing an unusually large number of offspring and crops yielding abundant harvests. She finds it quite remarkable. Louis immediately claims that all of this is due to his blessing. Lyanna questions what he could have possibly done, since all he seems to do is float around her room when he is bored. Louis proudly explains that he was forged with utmost devotion by the god of abundance, so it is only natural that any land where he resides would experience prosperity, with crops thriving and livestock multiplying. Lyanna remains unconvinced. Thinking about her crops, she decides that she should go check the fields before it gets too late. Meanwhile, Louis continues explaining that he represents a form of state. When there is an abundance of food, people naturally gather, and society begins to form. He claims that ancient civilizations were established in fertile lands for this very reason. Lyanna remarks that he seems to know many complicated words, which only irritates him further, as he questions whether she truly sees him as nothing more than a child. At that moment, a voice calls out from outside, asking if anyone is there. Lyanna pauses, recognizing that it is a male voice. She finds it unusual, as no one should be visiting at such a late hour. Carefully, she moves closer and peeks outside, only to discover that it is not just one man, but several strong-looking young men. The situation immediately feels suspicious. Louis reacts eagerly, suggesting that this is the perfect opportunity for him to demonstrate his abilities by turning the entrance into a sea of blood. Lyanna quickly shuts down the idea, telling him not to say such things, as it would only lower the property value. She orders him not to move until she gives permission. Finally, she opens the door and begins to ask who they are. However, before she can finish her sentence, she is struck by the sight of the man standing in front of her. She is momentarily captivated, thinking about how remarkably handsome he is. The man, however, addresses her in a completely different tone, stating that he has finally found her and calling her a thief cat. His choice of words does not match his refined and elegant appearance at all. As she continues to stare at him, somewhat mesmerized, she suddenly feels a sense of familiarity. She questions him, wondering if he is, in fact, her little kitten. Someone expresses the desire for a divorce, yet the king firmly tells the Empress that no such precedent exists. The Emperor, however, responds calmly that if it has never happened before, then this can simply be the first time. This bold statement leaves the king stunned, questioning what exactly she is implying. The Empress, unfazed, explains that she could become the first example in many different regards. For instance, she could be remembered as the wife who could not endure the tedious divorce proceedings and ultimately murdered her husband. Returning to the present, the old lady reflects on how she once believed her existence had been completely forgotten after those events. However, the man from before appears again, greeting her warmly and expressing his relief at seeing her in good health, while addressing her as his grandmother. He is none other than the Emperor himself, Carmine. The grandmother responds in kind, but Carmine tells her there is no need for such formality, reminding her that she is his grandmother after all. Despite this, she firmly replies that she abandoned such familial ties on the very day she declared her divorce at the Grand Cathedral, and therefore His Majesty should address her as Lady now. Carmine then mentions that he enjoyed the fruit she had sent, though he had been unaware that it was grown with blessings. The old woman internally reflects that her only intention had been to send Lyanna some beautiful fruits for her children, yet things had turned out in an unexpected way. She calmly explains that it is all a misunderstanding. Carmine questions this, asking whether it is the kind of misunderstanding that conveniently appeared at the same time her presence vanished from the imperial palace after her divorce. He further challenges her by implying that such unusually bountiful harvests could not possibly be unrelated, questioning if that is truly what she is claiming. The grandmother reassures him that she has nothing to be ashamed of. She reminds him that he knows very well that she left everything behind in the imperial palace that day, including the royal family name. Carmine then asks about the sword's whereabouts. She replies that she is not the one who possesses it. When he presses her on what she means, she explains that a villager has formed a pact with the sword. Carmine reacts with disbelief, almost amused, questioning whether she truly expects him to accept such a claim. The old woman remains resolute, stating that he may interrogate her as much as he wishes, but the truth will not change. She declares that the one who holds the sword is named Lyanna, and that she is merely an ordinary farmer. Soon after, Carmine stands directly before Lyanna. She questions whether he is certain he has come to see her, and he confirms that he has. This causes her to think that he does not appear to be an ordinary man. Despite that, he has been polite, and she cannot help but notice that he just called her a kitten, or rather, a cat. Being addressed in such a way, by such a handsome man, unexpectedly aligns with something she once imagined as part of her own little dreams. She decides that she will hear him out, but only outside. She trusts that he is not the type of ruffian who would intrude into a home where a woman lives alone. This remark provokes a reaction from the knight accompanying Carmine, who raises his voice at her. However, she firmly rebukes him, stating that he should not behave so shamelessly as to arrive unannounced at such an hour and then demand hospitality. Before the knight can escalate the situation further, Carmine intervenes and orders him to stop. This moment leads Lyanna to think that he must be someone of considerable importance. She wonders what exactly he could want from her, whether it is her farmland or perhaps her farming techniques, but she resolves not to be easily deceived by whatever he says. Carmine then reveals that he has come to retrieve the sword, claiming that he is its rightful owner. This causes Lyanna to question Louis, asking if that is true and whether he already has another master. Louis immediately denies it, insisting that such a claim is false and declaring that she is his only master. Lyanna, however, scolds Louis for what appears to be blatant two-timing, unable to reconcile his words with the situation unfolding before her. Louis immediately begins to argue back, insisting that he never said anything of the sort, and questioning why she would assume he is two-timing her. Lyanna, however, responds that it is because of the way Carmine presents himself, which irritates Louis. He demands to know since when she has cared so much about appearances. Carmine, observing this strange exchange, finally questions whether she is actually speaking to the sword. This makes Lyanna inwardly question how its supposed master cannot even recognize such a thing. Carmine then clears his throat and states that he is indeed aware that the sword possesses a will of its own. Lyanna acknowledges that he is correct, describing the sword as quiet and reserved. However, she also points out that Louis is clearly lying about Carmine being his master. She grows suspicious and demands to know what Carmine truly wants from her. She warns him firmly that if he lies even once more, she will refuse to open her door to him again. At last, Carmine introduces himself properly, stating that his name is Carmine and that he is the grandson of Lady Aurelian. Lyanna responds that she does not know anyone by that name. Carmine then explains that Lady Aurelian is the governor of this region. Upon hearing this, Lyanna suddenly recognizes the name and recalls that she has been having tea with her for years, affectionately calling her Granny. Carmine clears his throat once more and begins to explain the truth. He reveals that the sword is a deeply treasured artifact, one that can only be wielded by the head of their family. When his grandmother divorced and left the imperial household, the sword vanished along with her. This realization makes Lyanna think back, understanding why he had immediately called her a kitten earlier. In her mind, she concludes that the sword is nothing more than a troublesome burglar that secretly ran away, and because of it, both she and Granny have been treated like criminals. Carmine assures her that she will be generously rewarded if she returns the sword. Lyanna admits that she more or less understands the situation, but before she can finish her thought, Louis suddenly begins to cry. He pleads desperately, declaring that he will not leave her and that he intends to stay by her side until her hair turns white. He continues, lamenting that others merely labeled him as a family heirloom without ever truly caring for him. He challenges the claim of Carmine being his master, insisting that if it were true, Carmine should at least be able to say his real name. Lyanna agrees to this and relays Louis' demand to Carmine, asking him to state the sword's true name. Carmine appears confused at first and instead provides a nickname. Lyanna then tells Louis that Carmine does, in fact, know his name. This causes Louis to protest loudly, pointing out that Carmine only mentioned a nickname and that she herself was the one who used it in front of him. Lyanna dismisses this by saying that an ordinary person could never memorize Louis' full name anyway. This remark deeply wounds Louis, causing him to cry even more as he questions how she could say such a thing to him. Despite the chaos, Lyanna ultimately concludes that she cannot hand over the sword. She explains that since Louis himself denies Carmine as his master, she has no reason to give him up, and she politely tells Carmine to leave. Carmine, however, refuses to back down. He explains that the sword's value and significance are far beyond anything she could imagine, and therefore he cannot simply walk away. He declares that he must reclaim it, even if it requires resorting to underhanded method. Lyanna responds firmly, stating that Louis possesses a will of his own, and she cannot ignore his wishes by handing him over against his consent. Carmine questions this reasoning, emphasizing that the sword is ultimately a weapon, and what truly matters is her decision. He adds that he would prefer not to use force against a fragile young woman, but then asks her directly whether her answer would remain the same if she knew he was the most powerful person in the world. Lyanna answers without hesitation that her decision would not change. Carmine leans in closer, as if about to act on his earlier statement, which causes Lyanna to wonder if this is what he meant by underhanded methods. Acting quickly, she raises her hand and places a finger against his lips, telling him to be quiet, and to be more careful with his words. Carmine becomes visibly confused and asks what words she is referring to. Lyanna then accuses him of implying a contract marriage. This takes him completely off guard, and he questions why she would come to such an absurd conclusion. Lyanna, however, remains entirely serious. She explains that he himself mentioned underhanded methods, and from her perspective, a contract marriage would be the most logical approach. After all, as a married couple, they would share ownership over their possessions. In her reasoning, this would make it the only legal way for him to claim the sword. Carmine says to Lyanna that, in that case, will she marry him? This makes her think that this man really would not make it as a con artist. When she gets a proposal, it feels nice to receive one, even if it is like this. The crown prince did not even propose. It would have been perfect with a big bouquet of flowers, though. She says to him that this is such an uninspired proposal, and that he should bow elegantly at the waist or something. He immediately goes down on his knees. She reacts with delight, thinking, oh yes, yes, like that, but immediately says that she will have to decline the proposal. With that, she shuts the door, which leaves him and his knights speechless. Outside, someone shouts the word loudly. She comments that he is quite good-looking, but his voice is not. Louis tells her that actually it was a subordinate next to him who yelled, and that he himself was just standing there clueless. Lyanna questions whether Louis can really see things like that. He replies that he is the magic sword, and that seeing through a shabby wall like this is nothing. Anyway, Lyanna plans to just stay home for today, which makes Louis happy. He thinks that taking a break from work must mean she is finally going to play with him. Lyanna, however, thinks that maybe she should have just discussed how to separate that handsome man from his sword, which makes Louis cry out internally, wondering why she is making that face and whether she is thinking weird things. She assures him that of course she is not thinking at all. On the other hand, Germain can see that he has been fooled completely. It has been like that ever since he has been bewitched. The image of wavy red hair and a tiny straw hat pressed down tightly, along with light brown eyes, looks totally different from the way she acted. He has never been toyed with like this before. The granny approaches Carmine and remarks that he was supposed to return to the palace. He responds that he will have to impose on her again. She replies that she does not mind, but she thought that His Majesty would whisk Lyanna off to the Empire immediately. Carmine explains that he has been completely ensnared. That daring girl told him that the only legal way to own the sword is through marriage, and he also proposed to her. This makes the granny think that she knew Lyanna was bold, but who would have thought that she would dare suggest such a thing to the Emperor? She asks what happened next. He replies that he proposed to her, and she slammed the door in his face. This makes the granny remark that she really is a daring child. Carmine replies that he is absolutely right, and that he cannot possibly return like this because his pride will not allow it. His pride. The granny thinks that this is getting interesting. Someone who has walked a predetermined path since childhood, known for being indifferent and cold, is now revealing emotions like this. She wonders whether it is reckless of her to feel as if something romantic is about to happen at last. He might be having spring for himself, and she is actually rooting for him. After 2 days of hiding from that suspicious blonde man, that night, Lyanna has a dream. In that dream, someone asks what is yellow, fluffy, and sweet. She immediately wakes up, thinking that it must be a pumpkin. Pumpkin is so delicious, with its fluffy texture and sweetness. Now that she thinks of it, maybe she should make knife-cut noodles with lots of pumpkin in them. She imagines slurping up a mouthful of noodles and just imagining how delicious that would be. Sweet pumpkin entwined in a savory broth would be divine. She declares to Louis that today is the day, that it is time to vanquish enemies and revel in the joy of harvest. Louis immediately gets excited and interprets harvest as piling up the heads of her enemies and displaying them. However, he also wonders whether this outfit is a bit too shabby for the battlefield. She insists that no, actually, it is perfect, and that this outfit is flawless. However, in order to succeed, he has a very important job to do. Louis questions her and tells her to just say the word, because there is nothing he cannot do. She then asks whether he can transform like this, and make the handle like this, and that plate like that. Louis looks at the paper and says that he will give it a try. After he is turned into a knife, Lyanna is able to cut the pumpkin so cleanly. She wonders whether it is because the blade is sharp, while Louis cries out, calling to Lyanna that she is a fraud and that she is a mean girl. Lyanna tells him that life is like that, and that the world will rob him blind if he is not careful. She knows that he used to be drenched in blood, so she questions why he is being grossed out by plant sap. He shouts at her, saying that this is different while she questions how it is different. Another hand approaches her. It is Carmine, who asks Lyanna whether he should put this over there. He explains that he heard voices, so he came by. He thought that she was with the ego sword, but he guesses that he was wrong. However, the moment he sees the light coming out from the scissors, he questions whether that pair of scissors in her hand is the ego sword. She tells him that actually Louis loves serving her like this, while Carmine thinks that he does not believe Louis agrees with her. Lyanna then whispers to Louis that if she puts it like this, people will think they are getting along and leave them alone. Vulcan, upon hearing all this, wonders whether it really works if she says such things out loud and declares that he will never relinquish the ego sword. Finally, Nana asks him whether he is the obsessive male lead type, which makes him wonder what she means by that. She then tells him that it is just a thing, and since he is here, he could help move the pumpkins to the storage room. Carmine questions whether she is not selling them immediately. She explains that to enhance their value, they need to be dried for about 20 days, and that if he moves them, she will treat him to a very delicious meal. It is a dish praised like a mountain feast. Finally, the dish is presented to him, and Carmine questions what this is, wondering whether commoners in this area eat things like this. Lyanna tells him that it is something only her household makes. She asks him how it tastes and whether it is delicious, mentioning that she is even considering starting a meal kit business with it. Carmine eats it and notices that the soup is thick and salty, but he cannot stop eating it. It is so addictive. This makes her boast proudly, saying that that is the charm of pumpkin knife-cut noodles, and she encourages him to eat a lot. She thinks that the mountain spirit did not appear in her dream for no reason, because how can someone look so good even while eating? She knows that this must be what his grandmother must be feeling while looking at him. Whatever the case, she plans to simply enjoy herself while looking at him. With that thought, she asks him to try something else as well. Carmine questions what this is. She immediately tells him that this is homemade 5-flavor tea, and that she does not give it to just anyone. He notices that it has ice in it. She explains that she gets hot easily, so she dug an ice cave. Carmine, confused, questions how she dug an ice cave. She replies that she did it the only way possible, with a shovel. He tells her that he will help with things like that in the future, which makes her reply that marriage tricks do not work on her, and that she can manage on her own. There is no need to ask for help with something she can do herself. After seeing her determination like this, Carmine remarks that she is quite an unusual person. A few years ago, a black-haired angel descends upon the Barker kingdom. Some denounce her as a demon, while others insist that she should be treated as an esteemed guest. Among those who seek to use her for political purposes, the girl ultimately falls in love with the crown prince and becomes engaged to him. But now, the crown princess of the kingdom, Lyanna, shouts, asking David to talk to her. She declares that life does not end simply because one falls in love, after all. Crown Prince David looks at Lyanna and internally thinks that there was a time when that face seemed nothing but lovable. He tells Lyanna that he is sure he told her not to let anyone into the office. Lyanna shouts at him, telling him not to take it out on others, because this situation exists entirely due to him avoiding her. David questions what she just said. Lyanna demands to know why he keeps avoiding her, adding that she cannot even remember the last time they had a proper conversation. David coughs slightly and questions whether she truly wants to have an honest conversation with him. He recalls that last time she was angry because he danced with a lady, and before that she was upset because he did not give her the mermaid tear she wanted. He then asks what it is today, and what she has come to be angry about now. Lyanna becomes furious and insists that those incidents were all his fault. She points out that he said that lady was going to become his concubine, and that the mermaid tear by now is probably hanging around the neck of the princess from a neighboring kingdom. She demands to know whether he thinks she was upset without knowing the truth. David sighs and questions how many times he has to explain this to her. He states that for a king, the queen's position is a very important political tool, but he planned to give that position to her and asks whether that is not enough. This makes her declare that it is a cowardly excuse. She says that she has no one but him, no family, no friends, no one else in this world but him. Yet he piles up concubines like mountains in the name of politics. David questions what reason could be more important than politics to a king. She shouts that this is just another excuse, and that in the end, he is only proving that he is an incompetent crown prince. This angers David so much that he begins to shout. He orders his men to escort the crown princess out immediately. She turns toward the men and tells them not to make her laugh, questioning how this can be considered a serious conversation. She demands that David hurry up and give her an explanation. Regardless of her protests, the knights grab her to take her away. She shouts at him, wondering what all of this is, reminding him that he was supposed to be a devoted man who swore eternal love, yet now he has an armful of concubine. She reflects that this did not happen in the novel. A serious conversation only works when the other person is willing to listen. All of this stems from the fallout with Duke. The cathedral tried to strengthen its divine authority by enshrining Lyanna as a holy maiden. To counter this, they rushed into breaking off his previous engagement and arranged his engagement with Lyanna instead. However, David honestly thought the Duke would at least beg him to accept Lyanna as a concubine. Instead, the Duke disowned his daughter, calling her a disgrace to the family and garnering public sympathy. He never imagined that the Duke would actually cast his daughter aside like that. Not only was the position of Crown Princess suddenly taken from her, but noble support poured toward the Duke, who had no choice but to dishonor his daughter. With that backing, the Duke joined the Second Prince's faction, threatening the line of succession. Above all, David remembers that Lyanna never acted like this. He never thought there would come a day when he would miss her. He asks his lieutenant about Lyanna's current situation and whether they have found out anything. The lieutenant replies that they have searched the duchy thoroughly, but have not even found a trace of her. David thinks that they were only supposed to pretend to cast her out, but he wonders how a woman who only knows embroidery is supposed to survive as a commoner. This makes the lieutenant think that such words are not something he should be saying. In any case, Lyanna's usefulness ended the moment they got engaged, so there is no need to keep her as the crown princess. On the contrary, David considers that if Lyanna were reinstated as crown princess, the Duke would return to his side, and Lyanna, who has been cast out of her family, would also welcome it with tears of gratitude. This thought makes him snicker as he orders his men to find Lyanna quickly. On the other hand, Carmine thinks that Lyanna is such a strange woman. He wonders what she is trying to do with arms that look like they might snap if gripped too tightly, and on top of that, an ice cave. One of his men looks at him and questions what is wrong with him, noticing that he has been quiet for a while. Carmine asks his man whether he knows how to store ice. His man replies that, normally, one would keep it in a freezer. Carmine responds that this is usually the case, then wonders aloud how much a freezer costs. He considers that such an item might not be something one can buy even with money, since it can only be maintained by visits from the magic tower. Carmine questions how ordinary people obtain ice, realizing that those around him do not seem to know much about the livelihood of common people. He concludes that he needs someone who can offer more practical advice, someone like Lyanna. As he thinks this, he suddenly sees that she is actually standing right in front of him. He questions what she is doing there. She immediately shouts at him, declaring that she should be the one asking that question. She wonders whether he expected her to come here. Carmine replies that he lives here, so in that case, she must have come looking for him. She immediately questions why she would do such a thing and clarifies that she is here to meet his grandmother. Suddenly, she notices a scratch on his handsome face. She remembers that he was standing under the scorching sun yesterday without a hat, and now he has a burn. She thinks that she has been keeping something for situations exactly like this. In her mind, she recalls that wounds like this heal quickly with recovery potions, but she decides to tell him not to waste money on a recovery potion. While he is observing her, he notices the symbol on her hand and begins thinking that it looks like the mark of the owner of the Ego Sword. Meanwhile, she moves closer and puts something on his face while asking what he is thinking about. Carmine notices that whatever she applied feels quite refreshing. She explains that it is aloe vera, which is perfect for burns because of its cooling properties. She also mentions that there is a plant in his grandmother's greenhouse that looks similar, called agave. She admits that she does not know much about that plant yet, so she plans to compare them later. Carmine remarks that common folk seem to develop such practical wisdom in order to survive. She laughs lightly and says that he must be someone important, judging by the way he speaks. Carmine then questions whether her parents passed this knowledge on to her. She replies that she does not have parents. Almost immediately, she realizes that her words have caused a misunderstanding. She quickly corrects herself, assuring him that she does have parents, but that they abandoned her. Carmine becomes completely frozen at her words, and this reaction makes her feel deeply embarrassed. From what she can see, he does not seem like a bad person. She explains that she was abandoned when she was young after an embarrassing broken engagement and was discarded because she was considered a useless daughter. She reflects that it is not so bad now, as living alone feels nice. She admits that she likes her current life, since she can do whatever she wants freely, and she believes that her present situation is better. Lyanna looks at his face and wonders whether he is curious about her circumstances. He replies that it is nothing, yet she can clearly see that curiosity is written all over his face and that he is dying to know more. However, he still refrains from asking, and she guesses that he is trying to be considerate. She gently touches his face and comments inwardly on how kind he seems. The moment she realizes what she is doing, she gasps in shock. She quickly turns away, telling herself that this does not mean she has allowed herself to develop feelings, and she insists internally that she cannot give him permission to become close to her. Carmine clears his throat and says that he did not say anything at all. At that moment, someone from behind remarks that they had been wondering why she had not arrived yet, so they came to check on her. The newcomer then notices that Lyanna is still standing in the lobby, and internally thinks with amusement about these little rascals. The granny is about to call him Majesty, but Carmine immediately calls out to her, saying that he is just about to head up with Lady Lyanna, while referring to her as grandmother. This makes the old granny think that perhaps he has not mentioned the fact that he is the emperor. With that thought in mind, she turns to Lyanna and asks whether she has met her grandson. Lyanna replies to her that not only did they greet each other earlier, but she even applied medicine to him. This makes the granny think that the two of them have already gotten very close. Carmine then whispers that it might be misunderstood if she phrases it like that, but Lyanna insists that it is the truth, reminding him that they even had noodles together. This makes the old granny comment that if they are speaking to each other so formally, then they should stop using such formal tones, since they are the same age. She believes that they will become good friends in the quiet countryside, which makes Carmine respond that mutual respect is necessary. However, he notices that Lyanna looks extremely happy about this situation. Lyanna then teases him by saying that there is no way they could possibly be the same age, and she repeats the thought while joking that they must be destined for each other. Carmine can clearly see that these two are truly enjoying themselves at his expense, so he tells her to do whatever she wants. This makes Lyanna feel delighted, as she realizes that she now has a guy friend. With excitement, she suggests that they should all try some watermelon punch. Both Carmine and the old granny are astonished when they see it, finding the creation cute and pretty. They ask her how she managed to cut it in such a way. She proudly tells them that it is all about technique. This makes Carmine wonder whether she used the ego sword for such precise cutting, but she immediately denies it, insisting that it was not Lewis and absolutely not the sword. He responds that he does not trust her at all, which makes her wonder internally why he seems to know her so well. She tells him not to overthink things and urges him to simply open his mouth. Meanwhile, he tells her to stop avoiding the question. However, before he can continue speaking, she quickly places a heart-shaped piece of watermelon into his mouth. This action makes him blush intensely, and he remarks that it tastes so sweet, sweeter than any watermelon he has ever tasted before. At first, he thinks that perhaps it is just the setting that makes it taste better, but he soon realizes that the quality itself is definitely different. He wonders whether the difference comes from farming methods or from the people of the empire. Before meeting her, he had only thought about strengthening royal power by driving out nobles who targeted the throne, and he had never given serious thought to the lives of commoners. Until now, he has never considered how the food he eats is actually made, and the realization makes him feel ashamed. Moreover, thinking back to the time of the party, he asks her what a certain drink is. She tells him that it is grape juice, made from leftovers, and asks whether he would like to try it, assuring him that it is extremely delicious. This makes him remark that leftovers usually have poor market value. Lyanna replies that just because something has low market value does not mean it is bad. She explains that the love and effort poured into it remain the same. In a way, she compares it to people whose value can drop because of malicious rumors or slander, even though their true worth has not changed. He originally came to recover the ego sword, but as he talks with her, he begins to understand why the sword chose her as its master. He finds himself wanting to speak with Lyanna more about this matter. Just at that moment, he notices her downstairs and wonders what she is doing over there. She is clearly visible even from a distance. As he prepares to wave back at her, he suddenly recognizes that he is hearing an ominous sound, a sound that should never be heard. Even if he hears it, he knows that he must not acknowledge this sound. On the other hand, Lyanna says that this is why she likes grandmother's salmon, ham, and so many spices. She packs them all, and she always praises her cooking generously, so how could she not visit? She wonders what she should make with these ingredients, thinking that salmon sandwiches sound delicious. Just at that time, Luis comes and says that she is having fun without him, acting as if this is cruel. This makes her question why he is out here, since he is literally passing off the task after she said she would just bring watermelon punch and come back quickly. But now it is already the middle of the night, and he calls her a liar. She tries to tell him that the conversation got a little long. She guesses it is because Louis cut the watermelon, and it tasted more delicious. She adds that Carmine also liked it, which makes Louis even more pissed. thinking that that jerk was also there and wondering if she fell for it. This frustrates him, and he thinks that if this goes on, he will end up getting screwed too. Lyanna assures him not to worry, saying that will never happen, and questions why he is so worried. He explains that she does not know and shouts, asking if she knows how vicious the Marshall family is right now. He says they are treating her well because she is feeding them good food and telling them interesting stories, but as soon as their interest vanishes, they will try to take him, even if it means cutting off a hand. This makes Lyanna think that if that is Carmine's family name, she feels like she has heard it somewhere. It has been so long since she has been away from high society that she cannot remember. Regardless of that, Louis tells her not to ever let her guard down and not to be fooled just because the leather looks shiny. He reminds her that there are devils, and she needs to keep reminding herself of that. Lyanna assures him that it is okay. Okay, she will do so, and then questions whether he has decided to stay by her side forever. This makes him question what kind of question that is, and wonder if she is planning on abandoning him. Lyanna says no, not yet, explaining that she is just not the type to live a life of taking heads, and she wonders whether it is okay to continue living like this. He replies that all he desires is to serve her. It seems like there is more to this, and there must have been a very pressing reason for running away from home. Suddenly, he hides, which makes her question why he is suddenly hiding. When someone says to Lyanna that it has been a while, it is the nanny. The nanny says to her that she was really surprised to run into her like this, and thought Lyanna would still be at the house she took her to. Lyanna says that the crumbling house honestly does not matter. Whether it is fixed or moved, she is happy to see the nanny after so long. But the nanny has not visited even once in all this time, so why is she suddenly here? It feels unsettling. Regardless of that, Lyanna asks her what she would like to drink, mentioning that she has been drinking lately. The nanny asks if she can choose, and Lyanna replies that of course she can. While all this is happening, the nanny is somehow acting mysterious. Finally, Lyanna brings the tea and asks her to enjoy it. The nanny says to Lyanna that the Lord must have helped her, which makes Lyanna question what she is suddenly talking about. Actually, the one who brought her here was the Lord. The Lord is also in a difficult position, living alone after the divorce, so she thought she would take pity on the broken-off and abandoned miss. She adds that she is glad it turned out the way she expected. This makes Lyanna question what the nanny just said, and assure her that she is completely wrong if she thinks that grandmother has no interest in her, because she survived on her own efforts. This makes the nanny question whether she lived on her own, telling her not to lie since she does not even know how to make money. This makes Lyanna feel angry, realizing that now the nanny is openly looking down on her. Since she is no longer the Duke's daughter, the nanny probably thinks she does not need to be careful with her words. So Lyanna tells the nanny to believe it or not, and then adds that, by the way, the tea is for 1 coin. This makes the nanny question whether she is really going to charge her, complaining that it is too much for someone who came from far away to meet her. Lyanna shouts at her that she is the one who started by being rude, and she did not even acknowledge her efforts. She questions what that pitiful situation was supposed to mean. She can accept that, but to insult the Lord like that too, is that not rude? With that, she turns away and tells the nanny that if she has nothing more to say, she should please leave, because she is busy. The nanny stands up and asks Lyanna to please wait a moment, saying that the Duke told her to bring Lyanna back home. Nanny says that he has been so heartbroken ever since Lyanna left, worrying constantly, and fretting over whether something has happened to her. This makes Lyanna scoff, feeling worried and suspicious, wondering if he has suddenly found some new use for her. She thinks that she knew it. He was never a genuine person. So she tells the nanny that she is not interested in any of this anymore. She says that she does not care about her family, and she does not want to see them again, so the nanny can simply go back. The nanny responds that she will report back to the Duke and let him know just how sharp her words were as well. Valeriana then tells her to be sure to tell him that she cursed him too, from the top of her head to the tips of her toes. With that, the nanny leaves. The scene cuts to someone calling out to Carmine, addressing him as brother, and asking whether he is even listening, since he seems unusually deep in thought today. Carmine apologizes to his brother and questions what they were talking about. His brother tells him that he had asked when he planned to return. Even though Poston has a direct teleportation zone to the imperial capital, it is not proper for the emperor of a nation to stay too long in a foreign country. Princess Riz, after her divorce, had returned to her homeland, leaving the kingdom uncertain about her future. As a solution, the kingdom granted her a stay in a border region that neighbored the empire. His father, the previous emperor who missed her dearly, went to great lengths to create a teleportation zone linking the two regions. Who would have thought it would become so useful today? Carmine says to Riz that he feels bad for her Aunt Susan. The princess then says that there are only two conditions under which he is allowed to stay in that town. First, he is pursuing the sword, and second, he has fallen head over heels in love for the first time in his life. This makes Carmine think that this is ridiculous. Meanwhile, the princess loudly insists that so he should hurry up and return already. It is serious enough that she crosses his mind even during meetings. He can tell, just at that time, when the lieutenant arrives and reports that there is suspicious activity in the area. At first, certain individuals are seen visiting Lyanna's home, and now they seem to be actively watching her. Additionally, a few days ago, a commoner woman visited her, and it appears that she is connected to the group observing her. He wonders what they could possibly gain by spying on her. According to his grandmother, it seems to be related to her former fiancé. He recalls that Lyanna once told him that when she was young, she went through a disgraceful, broken engagement. This thought makes him extremely furious, as he cannot believe that the man has the nerve to show up now after tossing her aside so easily, especially now that she is finally thriving as a farmer and has found a path of her own. The lieutenant asks what he intends to do and where he is planning to go. Carmine immediately replies that he is going to protect Lyanna. They did agree to be friends, yet he wonders whether friends usually deal with their friend's ex-fiancé. Still, he cannot understand why he feels such intense anger about this situation. To justify his actions, he reasons that if she were to be kidnapped, the sword might be taken as well, so he decides that he is going to assess the situation. This makes the lieutenant think with admiration that he possesses such noble intentions. He also understands that if that wretched man is planning to forcefully take Lyanna back now, or worse, if he has realized her value only to beg for her return in tears, then the situation could become dangerous. On the other hand, Brianna appears strong, yet he wonders whether she might have been quietly struggling with loneliness. Even so, he firmly decides that there is not a chance he will allow anything bad to happen. Finally, he reaches her house and informs the lieutenant that he will go inside to check the situation while the lieutenant secures the perimeter. The surroundings are quiet, which makes him wonder whether she might have already left with the man. Suddenly, he hears a scream from inside. He immediately opens the door and calls out for her. Lyanna urgently shouts for his help and tells him to come quickly and hold the slab quickly, and after the roof is fixed, she thanks him sincerely, explaining that the house is 85 years old and that she renovated it herself. However, one corner of the ceiling had rotted wood, and bugs began crawling out of the decayed section, which she found extremely disgusting. She explains that she already tore out the damaged part of the ceiling that contained the bugs, and now there is nothing to be afraid of. Carmine insists that it is not as if he was scared or anything. Since Carmine is already present, Lyanna begins to wonder whether she should ask him to help with a few additional tasks. He is tall and probably strong, and she still needs to rehang the attic door. Carmine questions whether she usually handles all these repairs by herself. She replies confidently that of course she does, because if she does not, then no one else will. Carmine suggests that she could hire a carpenter. However, she explains that the area is a complete countryside, and there are no professional carpenters available. Even if there were, she would feel uncomfortable inviting someone into her house and she lives alone. Still, she reassures him that she has been managing just fine. She has become quite skilled at handling repairs after living on her own for so long. She remarks that he should have seen the rundown place where she used to live, which was practically falling apart. She had patched the roof with straw and built fences herself, and that was how she managed to survive until now. The thought frustrates her, as she feels that someone seemed almost jealous that Lyanna is doing well, and she suspects that the nanny would act all sweet and flattering if she were struggling instead. Carmine calls out to her and questions her about the hammer. She reacts with surprise when Luis suddenly begins shouting that she should not laugh, complaining that he is being treated like a hammer and used like a mere tool. Lyanna responds in confusion, wondering what he is talking about, because she only uses him for important tasks that truly matter. For situations like this, there is no tool she would rather use than him. This statement makes him angry, yet he still feels uncertain whether being compared to a hammer is truly the right description. Suddenly, he pulls her unexpectedly. The hammer slips from her hand, and not only the hammer, but she also loses her balance and falls. In that moment, she realizes that something feels warm, and she discovers that she has fallen directly on top of Carmine. Carmine asks only whether she is okay. It has been a long time since she has felt the warmth of another person. While Carmine continues checking whether she is hurt in any way, she quickly pushes herself away from him. Carmine warns her to be more careful, pointing out what could have happened if she had been injured. This makes her think that he is probably the one who hit the ground harder. He reminds her that since she lives alone, she cannot afford to get injured, yet he expresses relief that she is unharmed. The way he treats her with such concern causes her face to flush deep, leaving her blushing intensely. The person she used to tease and play with in the palm of her hand now appears completely different to her, and she wonders what she is supposed to do when he suddenly looks like a man in her eyes. She cannot understand why she forgot such an obvious fact, because this man is unbelievably handsome. She immediately stands up, which makes him question what is wrong. In that moment, she realizes that he appears to be the perfect husband candidate. Carmine also stands up and remarks that she is acting strangely, noticing that her face has been red since earlier as well. Meanwhile, Shalini silently begs him to please wait for a moment, wishing that he would give her some kind of warning before barging in so suddenly, because at this rate, she feels as if she might die from a heart attack. Carmine, on the other hand, gently holds her hand and questions whether she is certain that she did not hit her head earlier, insisting that he should take a look. He soon notices that her wrist is already beginning to swell, and he questions whether she is truly okay, realizing that it must hurt a lot. Lyanna insists that she is fine and points out that he is the one who must be hurting instead, considering that she fell from above and only injured her wrist, meaning she got off lightly thanks to him protecting her. However, the image keeps replaying in her mind. Carmine, noticing her condition, asks her to let him see her hand again, explaining that at the very least he is good at wrapping bandages. The scene soon shifts to him carefully bandaging her hand, which makes her think that this situation feels strange. She has been in situations like this many times before as a duke's daughter, yet she cannot understand why her heart is racing so much now. She reasons that perhaps it is because something unexpected just happened, such as falling into his arms. Carmine remarks that he had expected her to be feeling down, but seeing her look energetic brings him relief. This makes her wonder whether he had been worried about her. With that thought, he gets up and states that he will be leaving now. Lyanna quickly asks him to wait a moment, pointing out that it is almost lunchtime and suggesting that they eat before he leaves. However, he refuses politely, explaining that he cannot impose on someone who is injured. He advises that if anything happens, she should make sure to inform him and not try to handle everything on her own like she did today. This causes her to respond with only a quiet agreement. After the door is shut, Louis approaches Lyanna and apologizes, admitting that he forgot how much weaker she is compared to him. However, Lyanna simply calls out to Louis and moves forward to hug him tightly, thanking him sincerely. This reaction makes him wonder whether she is truly all right and whether she might have hit her head or something. She knows that if it were not for him, where else would she ever have the chance to be hugged by a national treasure of a handsome man? In comparison, that loser David was nothing but an utter embarrassment, possessing a terrible personality and a face that reminded her of half-dried squid. Even so, she understands that Carmine's interest is actually directed toward Louis. That is why he even proposed during their first meeting, and she realizes that the moment that just happened was likely all part of his attempt to win Louis over. Yet, even if he was using charming tactics, his appearance is simply too attractive to resist. Now she finally understands why emperors throughout history made foolish decisions over beautiful people. At the same time, she feels guilty about sending him away on an empty stomach. She begins to wonder whether she should prepare a sandwich or something for him. Before doing anything else, she decides that she first needs to boil some potatoes. Meanwhile, Louis feels extremely tired and somewhat sad, realizing that he has done so much work with the hammer today that he cannot transform into a hoe now, and therefore he needs to rest. Lyanna says that she is boiling the potatoes, not harvesting them, so he can simply go and rest on the bed. Louis then remarks that, by the way, he wonders whether it would be acceptable if that man were to turn out to be an emperor. She lets out a sigh and questions whether he is saying this because she mentioned emperors earlier. She admits that he is certainly handsome enough to be one, though she clarifies that she means his face alone, not his role as the main character like Carmine. He attempts to tell her that he truly is the emperor, but before he can finish speaking, he suddenly hears someone outside the house. This unexpected sound makes her wonder who it could possibly be at this hour. She considers that perhaps Carmine has returned again, thinking that he must have started craving her cooking after all. Without hesitation, she moves toward the door and opens it. However, her eyes widen in shock the moment she sees who is standing there. The scene then shifts to Carmine, who reflects that no matter how much work he does, it never seems to end. In truth, his thoughts remain completely disorganized because of what happened earlier. At that moment, Granny approaches him and asks whether he is all right. He replies that he is fine, and invites her to come inside. At the same time, he notes that it is already late and questions why she has not gone to rest yet. Granny explains that she thought he might be hungry, so she brought him a little something to eat. He wonders what she has brought, which prompts her to reply that he should be able to tell that it is a sandwich. Carmine remarks that he is about to sleep soon and that this feels more like a full meal rather than a light snack. However, Granny insists that he should at least take a bite before complaining. He reluctantly takes a bite while Granny comments that one must avoid late-night snacks in order to live long, though she jokingly questions what the fun in that would be. She also mentions that she heard he helped Lyanna earlier, which makes him question whether commoners truly handle everything on their own. Granny explains that while wealthy people may have money, they also need others to spend it for them. However, for a woman living alone, openly showing that she has money might invite danger. Because of this, she considers it admirable how Lyanna manages everything by herself. Carmine reflects on how Lyanna injured her wrist earlier and wonders whether she has eaten properly. Granny reassures him that he does not need to worry about that, explaining that the sandwich he is currently eating is a potato salad sandwich that Lyanna prepared and sent over earlier as a token of thanks. However, Granny admits that Lyanna's face looked a little pale, which makes her wonder whether it is because of the injury. Carmine comments that he told her to rest, yet she refuses to listen. Granny eventually leaves, remarking that he is just like her, eating while working, and with that observation, she takes her leave. Carmine knows that he should visit her tomorrow, both to thank her for the sandwich and to check on her injured wrist, though he realizes that he does not truly need an excuse to visit her. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound. The noise seems to be coming from the window, and he immediately wonders whether it could be an assassin. However, to his complete surprise, he discovers that it is actually the ego sword making the noise. He goes to the door and opens it, and a question is raised about whether he has finally decided to submit himself. This makes Louis think that the man is resolute, yet it also seems that Louise must have said something to him, though he cannot hear her voice at all. It is clear that the man is in a hurry, but the exact reason remains uncertain. Suddenly, something strikes him, and he wonders if something might have happened to Lyanna. At the same time, Lyanna is seen lying in her bed, struggling. Merely meeting him once has left her bedridden. There is a strange sense of satisfaction in it, yet she cannot help but feel overwhelmed with stress. She begins to question herself, wondering if she had been secretly holding on to expectations simply because they are family. Earlier, when she had opened the door, it had been her father. She notices the unsettling pattern. First, the nanny, and now her father. Something feels off. He is behaving in a way that seems almost like a disguise. She remarks that it has been a long time, and that he appears the same as ever. However, the Duke responds that such a thing could not be true, as he has been losing sleep day after day, worrying about her. She finds herself unable to make sense of his words. This entire situation was never part of the original story. In that version, Sayana arrives in the world, becomes engaged, and 2 years later, the story ends with their marriage. Reflecting on it now, everything has felt strange from the very beginning. Unlike the original plot, Sayana became engaged immediately upon arriving in this world, and Lyanna herself was brought down before she could even commit any villainous act. The pace of the story feels unnaturally fast. She wonders if she had skimmed through the novel too carelessly. If this is indeed the story after the original ending, then the original Lyanna would have likely died due to harsh conditions. And yet, the very man who had abandoned her to such a fate now stands right before her. She points out that he had never cared about her before. With 5 other daughters to marry off, he had no need for her. At the very least, he is no longer confusing her name. The Duke takes her hand, admitting that he knows she must resent him. However, he explains that he had feared that helping her would only anger the royal family further. Fortunately, his guest had been correct. By quietly accepting punishment, the Crown Prince now pities her and is secretly searching for her. Her gentle and obedient nature must have made him miss her. Hearing this, she feels hurt. It seems clear to her that he simply needs the strength of the duchy again. Welcoming a girl from another world as Crown Princess might have once seemed exciting, but in reality, she would be of little use in managing internal affairs or gaining influence. Instead, they likely faced backlash for discarding a flawless fiancé so cruelly. Bringing her back now would improve public opinion and repair his relationship with her father. The Duke questions her expression, remarking on how she looks, but she abruptly pulls her hand away and declares that it has nothing to do with her anymore. This confuses him, and he presses further, asking what she means. Surely she does not intend to refuse returning, especially when she could once again become the Crown Princess. Lyanna responds firmly that the title of Crown Princess has nothing to do with her anymore. She is no longer Lyanna Pond, she is simply Lyanna. There is no need for him to waste his breath on her. He should instead focus on marrying off one of her sisters. This prompts him to question whether she truly believes that familial bonds can be severed with a single declaration. She sighs and reminds him that he was the one who disowned her with a single word. His anger rises, but she remains composed, stating that this outcome works perfectly for her. She opens the door and asks him to leave. After he departs, it is evident that he will not give up so easily. If what her father said is true, then he will continue pursuing her relentlessly. He should simply focus on pleasing Sayana instead. The audacity of coming to find her without shame, after ruining her life and then believing that locating her now would fix everything, makes her feel sick. He may have left quietly today, but next time he will surely do everything in his power to drag her back to David. If she remains here, David will inevitably return to her life, and that is something she cannot allow. The only option left to her is to leave. At that moment, Louis approaches her, noticing that she seems lost in thought, and asks if she is all right. She insists that she is fine, and says that she simply needs to boil some potatoes before it gets too late. Louis gently tells her not to force a smile, encouraging her to admit if she is sad. However, Lyanna questions why she would be sad when she has him, her sweet Louis. She claims that she has already abandoned all expectations regarding that man. Yet as she says this, tears begin to fall. She finds it strange. She truly believes she is fine, so why does this keep happening? Louis reflects that this is the first time he has regretted being unable to transform into a human. Lyanna embraces him and assures him that she will be all right soon. The scene then shifts to the present. Carmine calls out to her, and she slowly opens her eyes. He asks if she is all right, and whether she recognizes him. Instead of answering, she begins to sneeze. He immediately tells her to wait while he goes to fetch water and medicine. Lyanna mentions that the medicine should be inside her bag. Carmine cannot help but wonder why the bag is so large. She tells him not to scatter her belongings, explaining that she will be leaving soon. This surprises him, and he questions why she intends to leave. She confirms that she must hurry. He asks why she would leave when this place should be her home. This makes her pause. It is indeed a warm and comforting place, and the grandmotherly lord is kind, yet she feels that she has no place she can truly call her own. As Carmine takes care of her, he begins to suspect that her sudden urgency is connected to her former fiancé, the one who had come searching for her before. For her to be so desperate to escape, there can only be one explanation. They must have finally realized her true worth and are trying to reclaim her. He notices that even in her sleep, she is crying. She always appears cheerful, yet someone is clearly responsible for this hidden pain. As he looks at her, he gently takes her hand and presses a kiss to it, silently vowing that he will protect her. Finally, morning arrives, and Lyanna wakes up with the feeling that she is alive again. Louis comes to her at once and wraps his arms around her, remarking that in all his life, he has never seen such a fragile master. His words make her pause, and she wonders if he had truly been that worried about her. She then asks him how long she has been asleep, realizing that she needs to hurry. At that moment, Carmine steps forward and reassures her not to worry, saying that it has not been very long. She looks at him in confusion and questions why he is there. Carmine explains that the ego sword called him, then asks if his presence is making her uncomfortable. She quickly denies it, insisting that it is not like that, but adds that she does not have time for this since she is very busy today. Carmine asks her to wait, reminding her that she is a patient who has just woken up and needs to eat first. Soon, breakfast is brought to her. She looks at the meal with uncertainty, wondering if Carmine was truly the one who prepared it. Nevertheless, she expresses her thanks and takes a bite. As soon as she does, Carmine asks where she is planning to go. She is startled and questions whether she had said something like that while she was half asleep. Carmine explains that her packed bag gave it away. She reassures him that she is not leaving the place entirely, which leads him to ask where she is going instead. She turns the question back on him, asking why he wants to know. He answers simply that he intends to go with her. This catches her completely off guard, and she wonders what he is saying all of a sudden. She points out that he must have responsibilities in this area, but he replies that while it is true he came to retrieve the ego sword, and it is now with her, that is not his main reason. He steps closer and takes her hand, admitting that he is worried about her. His sincerity causes her to blush. He continues, saying that he cannot ignore the thought of her being sick and alone like she was the previous day. or crying out of loneliness. He believes she needs someone to wake her from nightmares, and for that reason, he wants to stay by her side. She had not expected him to care so deeply, and his words move her greatly. However, she knows she cannot keep relying on a friend in this way. She thanks him, but tells him that she must refuse. Carmine, however, insists that he is not joking. If she has nowhere to go, she can come to his home instead. This makes her question whether he is proposing again, and she asks him to stop joking. At the mention of a proposal, he becomes serious and says that he wants to say it properly. Then, to her complete shock, he lowers himself onto one knee and asks her to marry him. She is utterly bewildered, unable to comprehend how packing her belongings to leave has suddenly turned into a marriage proposal. Louis quietly tells her that Carmine is completely serious. He recalls how, the moment he heard that she was unwell the previous night, Carmine had rushed over without hesitation. Lyanna knows that even if Carmine's feelings are genuine, being with her could place him in danger. She has not even explained her situation or her true identity, so she believes she should refuse him. Yet when she looks at his face, she hesitates. In her mind, she acknowledges that he is handsome, dependable, and always there for her, even in her weakest moments. He respects her and embodies everything she had once imagined in her ideal partner. Turning him down and leaving him behind feels deeply unfair. Observing her hesitation, Carmine wonders if this will be another rejection. With no other choice, she finally reveals the truth. Her real name is Lyanna Pond, and she is one of the 5 daughters of the duchy. He listens calmly, simply responding with a quiet acknowledgement. His reaction confuses her, and she asks if he is not surprised. He explains that he will listen to everything before reacting, then asks if she is packing to return to the Pond Duchy. She tells him that her father had come to take her back against her will, and that she is only leaving to escape him for a while, as she sees no other option. As she thinks further, a realization strikes her. Does she really need to go somewhere far away? If her father cannot find her, that alone would be enough. Perhaps she could remain here and simply find a place to hide temporarily instead of leaving altogether. She thanks Carmine, saying that he has helped clear her thoughts. She tells him that she is going out for a while, but before she can leave, he stops her, pointing out that she has not yet answered his confession. She cannot help but think that he is like an unstoppable force of flirting, his personality so different from before. Carmine clarifies that he means everything he said. Even after her situation is resolved, she does not need to wait. He will stay by her side. She warns him that her father is a duke, and even he might not stand a chance if he were to come here. Carmine reassures her without hesitation, saying that no matter what happens, he will protect her. He asks her to look at him and give him an answer. Then, with unwavering determination, he asks her to date him with marriage in mind. The scene then shifts to the palace, where the teleportation orb suddenly begins to act up. The princess is startled and immediately shouts at Carmine, scolding him for frightening her and asking what would have happened if she had fainted from shock. He casually responds that he would have covered it up as a workplace injury, which only irritates her further. She tells him to stop talking like a shady businessman and to go handle the day's agenda. However, she soon notices that he is unusually quiet. He lets out a deep sigh, and she begins to wonder if something is wrong. It seems as though he might have made some kind of mistake. The man who once cared about nothing but work is now behaving strangely ever since returning from that town. Though she finds it troublesome, she considers humoring him for a moment and asks what is bothering him. She thinks it would be best to hear him out quickly before returning to her overdue tasks. When he finally speaks, he tells her that he has found someone he wants to marry. At first, she simply processes his words in silence. Then, all at once, she erupts in shock, shouting in disbelief at the mention of marriage. The princess nearly drops her teacup, her composure slipping as disbelief overtakes her. She questions whether they are truly speaking about a real human woman and not a cat, and the thought unsettles her. It forces her to reconsider everything she has believed about him until now. She reflects on how numerous noble ladies have exhausted themselves trying to capture his attention, only for him to suddenly speak of marriage after spending his time petting cats. The sheer absurdity of it leaves her stunned. Nevertheless, as a noblewoman of a duchy, she quickly resolves to gather information regarding the annulment. Germain, composed as ever, adds that while she conducts her investigation, he would like her to look into 2 additional matters. He expresses his desire to erase the Pond Duchy chief from existence, and, if that proves impossible, he intends to annex Poston as imperial territory. The princess immediately urges him to calm down. She acknowledges that Lyanna has suffered injustice, but she reminds him that eliminating a duchy and annexing land are not trivial matters. She remarks that the saying about a late-blooming thief being the most dangerous seems to fit him perfectly. Then, as realization dawns on her, she raises her voice and demands to know why he went to Poston in the first place. The most important matter, the eagle sword, has not been mentioned even once since then, and she cannot believe he has forgotten it. Carmine reassures her that there is no need for concern regarding that matter. His calm confidence leaves her with little room to argue, and she decides to say no more. Instead, she shifts her focus and questions whether the young lady has agreed to marry him. She finds it difficult to believe that any young woman would so readily accept a proposal from the emperor, concluding that the girl must be quite bold. Carmine then reveals that Lyanna does not yet know he is the emperor. This revelation shocks the princess even further, and her voice rises in disbelief. Meanwhile, for Lyanna, the events of the previous day still feel like a dream. She finds herself uncertain about what to do. Carmine's expression lingers in her thoughts, and she realizes that his feelings are genuine, not something shallow or fleeting. Her heart races so intensely that she cannot even bring herself to meet his gaze. When Carmine questions whether her hesitation stems from an inability to forget her former fiancé, he grows visibly serious and remarks that if that is the case, he would have to cut the man's head off. Lyanna immediately protests, telling him that he cannot say such things so casually. She is overwhelmed, unsure of what she is supposed to do. There is still so much she does not know about him, and too many unresolved problems remain. Yet despite all of this, she ultimately declares that she will date him. Though her mind is still conflicted, her heart is already moving in that direction, and she begins to think of him as her boyfriend. The scene shifts, and Lyanna is now with the old grandmother. The elderly woman mentions that someone has brought her a plant. It is not the type typically used for grafting, yet it tastes remarkably delicious. She wonders aloud if it could possibly become even sweeter. Lyanna responds affirmatively. The grandmother cautions that eating too much of it might cause a stomachache, and in response, Lyanna accidentally addresses her as brother-in-law, causing an awkward moment. Realizing her mistake, Lyanna immediately apologizes, flustered. The grandmother gently reassures her that there is no need to apologize. However, she expresses concern, noting that Lyanna, who usually shines brightest when speaking about farming, now seems unusually downcast. Lyanna reflects inwardly, recognizing that her troubles stem from her grandson, yet she finds it difficult to explain such matters or even decide where to begin. Instead, she changes the subject and mentions that her father recently came by. She explains that the crown prince is searching for her again. The grandmother questions his motives, and Lyanna admits that she is unsure. She speculates that he may want to win back sympathy from the nobles, or perhaps force her into cleaning up after the crown princess as his consort. The grandmother grows indignant at the thought, declaring that she should block him using her authority and questioning how he dares to enter the territory without permission. However, Lyanna quickly asks her not to do that, insisting that she does not want to cause trouble. When asked what she plans to do instead, Lyanna reveals that she has been considering leaving the place for a while. The grandmother responds with quiet pride, stating that while it may not be self-praise, there is no place more welcoming to outsiders than this one. She reminds Lyanna of the sweet potato field she first cultivated, which may have already been seized by the Lord, and points out that Lyanna is not particularly street smart. The dangers of wandering elsewhere weigh heavily in her word. Overwhelmed, Lyanna blurts out that her boyfriend has told her to stay here. The grandmother immediately asks who this boyfriend is, and Lyanna shyly confirms the relationship. The grandmother presses further, wondering if it is someone she knows. At that very moment, Carmine enters and calmly confirms that it is indeed him. The grandmother looks between the two of them, her surprise quickly turning into excitement. She enthusiastically declares that they should be married immediately, suggesting next week and even expressing her wish for 3 children, insisting there is no time to waste. Carmine, slightly taken aback, points out that they have only been dating for a single day. The grandmother laughs at herself, admitting she may have gotten too excited, and then asks when their relationship even began. Lyanna notices how uncharacteristically shy Carmine appears and finds it difficult to reconcile this with the man who had been so boldly flirtatious the day before. She explains that they grew closer while sharing meals and that things simply developed naturally. The sight of them holding hands fills the grandmother with joy, and she asks what they plan to do next. Lyanna admits that they have not decided anything yet and jokingly suggests hiding in an ice cave. The grandmother quickly dismisses such an idea and proposes that Lyanna stay in the Lord's castle instead. She reasons that no matter how bold Lyanna's father may be, he would not dare enter the Lord's castle without permission, nor would he think to search for her there. Lyanna considers the offer, feeling that it would indeed be a safe and comforting option, but she hesitates, worried about causing inconvenience. The grandmother reassures her warmly, saying that she would be delighted to have her stay, as the castle often feels lonely. Hearing this, Lyanna feels a surge of happiness. She reflects on how fortunate she is to have ended up in this place after being abandoned, where she met someone as kind as the lady grandmother. The grandmother, in turn, insists that her kindness exists because of Lyanna, and urges her not to overthink it. With that, she leaves to instruct the butler to prepare a room for Lyanna. As the arrangements are being made, Carmine adds that the room should be close to his own, insisting that if anything happens, he must be the first to reach her. His words cause Lyanna to blush deeply, and she exclaims that he should express himself more plainly, as his current way of speaking is far too overwhelming. Unable to contain her embarrassment, she quickly excuses herself and leaves the room. Once the door closes, the grandmother turns to Carmine and admits that she truly does not understand his thoughts. Carmine asks whether she disapproves of the relationship or if her concerns stem from Lyanna's status. The grandmother reacts strongly, insisting that he should not mistake her for someone who would oppose such a union over something so trivial. Instead, she points out that Lyanna does not know he is the emperor, and questions when he intends to reveal the truth. She warns that if Lyanna discovers it later, she may feel deeply betrayed. Carmine responds honestly, explaining that he never intended to keep it a secret. However, he admits that he is afraid that when faced with the truth, Lyanna might choose the simple life of the farm over him, the emperor. He remains quiet for a while after asking his grandmother whether she believes Lyanna would abandon the farm and choose him instead. His grandmother replies that Lyanna is certainly happy living there, but he must tell her the truth. A relationship built on lies, no matter how beautiful it appears, ultimately becomes an empty illusion. Her words are shaped by her own past, as she recalls how her husband once spoke of living happily together, only for reality to prove otherwise. She questions whether an emperor of an entire nation could truly live only for one woman. She adds that Lyanna should be satisfied with having been the crown princess and criticizes the selfishness in expecting more. Despite her harsh tone, she makes it clear that she genuinely cares for both of them. She considers Carmine her dear grandson and Lyanna her precious friend, and she sincerely hopes that the two of them can live happily without experiencing the kind of pain that defined her own marriage. Her unhappy union is well known, even within the royal family. Though she is acknowledged as a master of swordsmanship, she wonders aloud whether she might have been happier had she never come to the empire at all. Carmine understands her point. He knows he cannot force Lyanna to give up what she wants for his sake, because such a choice would never bring true happiness to either of them. Instead, he resolves that protecting Lyanna and her farm, while finding a way for them to be happy together, is what truly matters. Standing outside, lost in thought, he reflects on how what began as a half-joking idea now feels like the only viable path forward. If he annexes the lands as part of the empire, given their proximity to its borders, the task should not be overly difficult. He wonders if doing something of that magnitude might earn Lyanna's forgiveness when he eventually reveals his true identity. For the first time, he experiences a deep fear of not being accepted by someone he cares about. The scene then shifts. Lyanna is filled with excitement as she looks around her room, marveling at how spacious it is and how soft the bed feels. The brightness in her voice seems to dispel all of Carmine's worries. Although she had been uncertain earlier, she now feels relieved and grateful. Thanks to Carmine, she is staying in the safest place possible, the Lord's castle. In her mind, he appears dependable and impressive, and she cannot help but think that her boyfriend is incredibly admirable. At the same time, she finds herself wondering why he shows no fear, even after learning that her father is a duke. This leads her to question his true identity, suspecting that his position may be far higher than she initially believed. Yet, as the duke's daughter, she is certain she has never seen him before. A knock sounds at the door, and she permits the visitor to enter. Carmine steps inside and asks whether the room meets her expectations. She expresses her satisfaction, noting how soft and comfortable the blankets are. He feels relieved to hear this and suggests that they take a short walk outside. As they walk together, Lyanna becomes acutely aware that he is now her boyfriend. This awareness makes her unusually nervous. Carmine remarks that a great deal has happened that day. When their eyes meet, she quickly looks away, unable to maintain eye contact. Although this is not the first time she has walked alone with him, everything feels different now. An unfamiliar warmth stirs within her, making her heart feel light and restless. She begins to wonder if this is what love feels like, because it was never like this before. Her thoughts drift to a past moment with David. On that occasion, she had tried to express concern, mentioning that he seemed unusually busy. However, he had immediately stood up, confirmed that he was indeed occupied, and dismissed the conversation, leaving without giving her the chance to say anything more. She feels as though she cannot breathe, her heart weighed down by an unbearable heaviness, yet she understands that she must remain silent and composed. If she wishes to become the crown princess, she must smile no matter what. She has always been told that simply being loved is the greatest happiness, but deep within, she begins to question whether what she experienced could truly be called love. The scene returns to the present as Carmine calls out to her, gently asking if he may hold her hand. The request catches her off guard, and she pauses in surprise. In that moment, she becomes keenly aware of how different he is from David, who once abandoned her. This, she realizes, is how it is supposed to feel: kind, warm, and sincere. The realization overwhelms her, and tears begin to fall. Carmine becomes flustered at the sight of her crying, unsure of what he has done wrong. He quickly assumes that she may not want to hold his hand and reassures her that it is not necessary if she feels uncomfortable. However, she shakes her head and explains that it is not the case. She confesses that she once believed she would never be able to love someone again. Yet without even realizing it, she has come to truly like him. Somewhere along the way, he has deeply engraved himself into her heart. Carmine then admits that there are still many things he has not told her. He cannot reveal everything honestly at this moment, but he asks if she can wait for him. He promises that he will not disappoint her. In response, she takes his hand and tells him that she will wait, because she trusts him. As evening falls, Lyanna sits brushing her hair. Exhaustion begins to settle over her, and she reflects on how large the room is, wondering whether she will even be able to sleep properly in such a vast space. Although she grew up in similarly grand rooms at the Duke's estate, something feels different now. A lingering sense of unease tugs at her, as though she has forgotten something important. Suddenly, she remembers. It is Louis. He appears clearly upset, reminding her that she said she would return shortly. He cannot understand what she has been doing all this time. She apologizes repeatedly, explaining that she had planned to come back for him in the morning. This only makes him even more irritated, accusing her of being mean after he waited for so long. She continues to apologize and informs him that they will be staying at the castle for a while. She adds that she will explain everything tomorrow as well. However, this does little to calm him, and he continues to complain loudly about her behavior. The next morning arrives. As Lyanna awakens, she notices that another beautiful princess is lying beside her. At first, she glances at the unfamiliar figure and then turns her face away, assuming it must be a dream. However, the princess suddenly shouts at her to get up, scolding her for closing her eyes again when someone is standing right in front of her. She even declares that Lyanna will lose 20 points for her behavior. Startled, Lyanna realizes that this is not a dream. She quickly asks who the girl is, confused by her presence in what she believes to be her own room. The princess confidently introduces herself as Susan. This leaves Lyanna wondering if Susan is the original owner of the room, as the confidence she exudes is undeniable. The two of them exchange greetings, though Lyanna cannot help but think about Louis. At a moment like this, he would have been talking endlessly, keeping her company and easing the tension. Instead, she finds herself facing Susan alone. Gathering her composure, Lyanna informs Susan that, in case she was unaware, the room now belongs to her, as the Lord has instructed her to stay there. Susan calmly replies that she already knows, and adds that she came specifically to see her. As she speaks, she offers Lyanna a grim smile, one that carries an unsettling undertone. The scene shifts to Lyanna taking a quiet walk. As she moves along, she reflects on how strange Susan is. Lyanna had stepped outside because she felt awkward, yet now Susan is following her, despite them barely knowing each other, not even by name. This behavior puzzles her. Eventually, Susan asks where she is going, and Lyanna responds that she is simply out for a walk to clear her thoughts. Susan reacts enthusiastically, remarking that walks are wonderful, and casually mentioning that Lyanna is likely to receive a passing grade. This comment confuses Lyanna, though she cannot sense any suspicion from Susan. In fact, everyone they pass greets Susan naturally, which makes her seem trustworthy. Soon after, Susan asks whether Lyanna likes the area. Lyanna replies that it is wonderful, praising the generosity of the people and the kindness of the Lord's grandmother. Susan then insists that the empire is even better, a statement that causes Lyanna to wonder why the Empire has suddenly been brought into the conversation. Susan proceeds to question what Lyanna thinks of the Emperor. Lyanna, unable to follow the thread of these questions, grows increasingly puzzled. She begins to suspect that perhaps rumors about her crops have spread as far as the Empire. If that is the case, she considers that expanding her business there could be an excellent opportunity, especially since it is relatively close to this region. With that thought in mind, Lyanna changes the subject slightly and mentions that there are wild raspberries nearby, offering Susan the chance to try some. Susan hesitates, noting that such berries are usually washed before eating, but Lyanna dismisses the concern, reasoning that in such clean air, washing them hardly seems necessary. Susan tastes one and observes that while it appears sour, it is actually quite bland. Lyanna explains that when turned into jam, the berries develop a tart flavor. She adds that she prepares everything she eats herself, which leaves Susan wondering how she manages to. This somehow reminds Susan of Carmine's reaction in the past. Lyanna then encourages her not to stand idle and instead help gather more berries, mentioning that she will later prepare a refreshing raspberry iced. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Luis is quietly observing Carmine as he trains. Luis has heard that Carmine is the grandson of the foolish former emperor, yet the young man before him seems entirely different. There is something strangely familiar about him, especially in his confident gaze, which reminds Luis of his first master. Memories begin to surface. His first master once asked him for his name, and Luis had replied that he had none, that ego sword was sufficient. That self-assured young man, who had sought to slay dragons, had captivated Luis and ultimately became his first master. In time, that same man rose to become the Empire's first emperor. However, as his stature grew, he gradually became more of a symbol than a person. Successive emperors treated Luis merely as a ceremonial sword, a display piece devoid of true purpose. Even so, Luis endured, sensing traces of his first master's presence in their descendants, until it all ended with the previous emperor, a hopeless fool who could not even hear his voice. When the Empress divorced that emperor, Luis quietly left the Empire alongside her. He never imagined that he would encounter a descendant of his first master in such a distant place. Reflecting on this, he regrets not asking to be given a proper name back when his master was still alive, especially if that man had truly been using such a crude designation for him. At that moment, Carmine suddenly calls out, telling Luis to stop sneaking glances and to come out if he has something to say. Luis becomes flustered, insisting that he was not sneaking glances at all, but merely ensuring that Carmine was training correctly. Carmine, unable to hear him, assumes that Luis is once again talking about Lyanna. Carmine then declares that he is serious about Lyanna. While he initially approached her because of the ego sword, things have changed. Now he genuinely respects Luis's decision to choose her as his master. Hearing this, Luis cannot help but feel puzzled, wondering why Carmine is such a genuinely kind and considerate person. While Carmine wonders whether Luis has come because he wants him to wield him, he finally steps forward and grabs the sword. Luis, caught off guard, thinks that perhaps he should allow this, if only briefly, to determine whether Carmine is truly worthy of becoming his master. As Carmine begins training with him, Luis feels a sudden unease creeping in. He realizes that he is almost being swayed, and this thought alarms him. Carmine's skill and composure only make matters worse, as his competence is undeniable. At the same time, Carmine assumes that Luis is permitting him to wield him so that he can protect Lyanna, and he silently expresses his gratitude. Luis, however, does not mean any of this in the way Carmine believed. Despite that, he cannot deny that being wielded by Carmine feels right in some inexplicable way. These conflicting emotions leave him troubled, unsure of what he should do. At that very moment, Lyanna notices Carmine in the distance. Her gaze then shifts, and she realizes that Luis is there as well. Suddenly, Luis rushes toward her in distress, declaring himself to be a bad sword. His abrupt movement startles Lyanna, causing her to drop the raspberries she had been holding. Before they can fall to the ground, Susan swiftly catches them, calmly stating that the raspberries are safe. Lyanna, impressed, remarks on her excellent reflexes. Carmine soon arrives at the scene and questions Susan about what she is doing there. In response, Susan addresses him as her brother, revealing that she is the second princess of the Empire. This revelation leaves Lyanna stunned, and she begins to wonder if this means Susan is actually Carmine's younger sister. Later, in the kitchen, Lyanna reflects on the situation. She thinks that Susan could have simply stated that she came to see who her future sister-in-law would be, rather than barging into her room and behaving so strangely. The realization that Susan is her future sister-in-law makes Lyanna anxious, and she worries that she may have made a poor impression. Meanwhile, Susan notices that the ego sword remains close to Lyanna's side. Susan then asks Lyanna what she plans to do next now that everything has been clarified. Lyanna responds by deciding to demonstrate how to make raspberry iced tea. She explains the process step by step. First, sugar and lemon juice are added to black tea. Once the sugar dissolves, the raspberries are strained and poured through a sieve into the tea. The mixture is then chilled before being poured into a glass. When the preparation is complete, the refreshing raspberry iced tea is finally ready. As Lyanna presents the drink, she notices that Carmine has also entered the room. She finds it puzzling that even with his sister present, he is sitting there soaked, seemingly trying to draw attention to himself. She quietly warns him that he will catch a cold, while Carmine explains that he rushed over because he thought he might be kept waiting. Observing this exchange, Susan begins to wonder if she should speak to him more informally. At that moment, the grandmother enters from the back and asks whether they have already finished. Lyanna replies that, with Susan's help, everything was completed quickly. When it is suggested that the two of them made the tea together, Carmine laughs and the grandmother joins in, clearly amused by the unexpected teamwork. Susan, however, senses something unusual. The atmosphere between her brother and their grandmother feels different from what she is accustomed to. More importantly, despite Carmine being the emperor, everyone is speaking to him in a casual manner. This leads her to suspect that Lyanna may not actually know his true identity. Judging by their behavior, this assumption seems correct. She prepares to reveal the truth, but before she can speak, Carmine abruptly intervenes. He remarks that it has been a while and asks if she would like to talk with her brother. Susan reacts with disbelief, exclaiming that what he is saying is absurd. Nevertheless, Carmine ushers her outside, insisting that they step out and talk for the time being. After they leave, Lyanna turns to the grandmother and admits that she had no idea Carmine had a younger sister. The grandmother explains that he actually has two younger sisters, twins, and that they likely came because they were worried about him, as he has been away for quite some time. This revelation causes Lyanna to pause and think more deeply. She begins to wonder if the unspoken secret surrounding Carmine might be connected to his sisters. If that is the case, then it could mean that the troubles related to her illness have already begun to surface. A few days earlier at the Imperial Palace, Susan is in the middle of a full-blown tantrum, loudly demanding to know exactly when her brother will return. She wants to take a vacation to the south, yet finds herself unable to leave the capital because of his prolonged absence. The first princess responds with calm resignation, telling her to give up on waiting, as it does not seem like he will return anytime soon. She admits that she does not know what exactly has happened, but mentions that there are rumors he has found someone he intends to marry. This revelation immediately catches Susan's attention. She finds it absurd that a man who once showed interest only in cats is now suddenly planning to marry, and she questions whether such a person even truly exists. The first princess confirms that, surprisingly, it is indeed true. This leads Susan to another concern. She wonders about the ego sword, and whether he is too preoccupied with his personal affairs to bring it back. The first prince speculates that perhaps the situation is not one of romance but rather unrequited love, and considers the possibility that her brother may feel unable to return because of how things have unfolded. As the emperor of a nation, he seemingly lacks nothing, yet something is clearly holding him back. Despite all of this, Susan resolves that she will have to see her brother herself and personally bring back this supposed fiancé. Her determination prompts the first princess to sharply reprimand her, insisting that she should not interfere in someone else's love life and should instead focus on her own responsibilities. However, Susan refuses to listen and runs off, complaining that it is unfair for him to enjoy what seems like a vacation alone. Now, back in the present, Susan confronts Carmine with visible frustration, demanding to know what on earth he is doing, and whether he even understands how long Liz and she have been waiting for him. Carmine, however, assumes that Liz is likely too occupied with her work to care that much about his absence. Susan immediately rejects this notion, insisting that it is not true. She then questions him about his secrecy, asking why he never revealed that he is the emperor, especially when the ego sword is right there treating Liz as its master. She cannot understand why he would allow such a situation to persist. Furthermore, based on what Liz has said, Susan knows that Carmine is planning to marry her. She warns him not to claim that he is merely hiding his identity to obtain the ego sword. Carmine quickly denies such a motive, admitting that while he may have acted that way in the past, he He cannot bring himself to marry without love now. Initially, he believed that revealing his identity would work against him, fearing that Liz might use that knowledge as leverage against him. However, as time passed and their conversations deepened, they grew closer, and he found himself unable to reveal the truth. He also comes to understand why Louis chose Liz, and because of that, he feels compelled to protect her and respect Louis's decision to follow her. Susan realizes that, in the end, his silence stems from fear that Liz would come to hate him if she learned the truth. The ego sword, after all, is a symbol of imperial legitimacy, and Carmine is fully aware of its importance. Frustration builds within Susan as she grits her teeth, irritated by how often he refers to Louis, as though he has already become close friends with it. She challenges him further, asking whether he would simply accept it if the ego sword decided never to return. Carmine responds that ultimately through marriage, he would be able to share ownership of it, and therefore considers the issue effectively resolved. Unwilling to let the matter rest, Susan presses on. Even if he claims to have secured the ego sword, she demands to know when he plans to return. She reminds him that, regardless of the presence of their grandmother, this place is still a foreign country. Carmine reveals that he has already asked Liz to consider incorporating this region into the empire. By doing so, he would no longer need to leave and could continue managing affairs from there as he currently does. Susan is taken aback, questioning whether he is serious, and wonders why Liz has not mentioned such a significant matter to her. Carmine assures her that he is entirely serious. He explains that the location is near the border, making it relatively easy to integrate into the Empire's systems, including communication networks and teleportation zones. He adds that remote governance is perfectly reliable under such conditions. Once it becomes imperial territory, the ministry would have no grounds to oppose the arrangement. He expresses confidence that Susan herself will come to appreciate the place if she stays long enough, insisting that it is, without a doubt, a wonderful place. Susan internally fumes, wondering if Carmine truly believes she came all this way just to listen to such nonsense. As he continues explaining that his identity must remain a secret until everything is settled, her frustration boils over. She declares that she does not care and calls her brother an idiot, convinced that this entire situation is somehow Lyanna's fault. Yet even as she thinks this, she cannot help but feel as though this year itself is cursed, as if she has been stuck endlessly babysitting troublesome figures. She questions why Lyanna always seems to end up surrounded by such complicated people. Lyanna, noticing her agitation, asks whether she has had a fight with Carmine. Susan, on the verge of tears, refuses to engage and tells her not to speak to her. Nearby, the glass greenhouse catches Lyanna's attention. The surrounding area appears neglected and messy, leading her to conclude that it has not been properly maintained. She recalls suggesting to her grandmother that they have a picnic there, but remembers how her grandmother's expression twisted at the idea. This makes her wonder if there is some complicated history tied to the place. Without dwelling on it further, Lyanna heads down and asks Louis if he can transform into scissors, as she intends to tidy up the flower beds. Susan immediately protests, insisting that such tasks are meant for gardeners. Lyanna responds casually, acknowledging the point, but continues anyway. She sits down beside Susan, repeating her earlier remark in a thoughtful tone. Susan, already furious from her argument with her brother and exhausted from doing random chores all day, insists that a future empress should not be doing such things. Lyanna, however, calmly tells her that if she is going to help, she should at least wear gloves, as beginners are likely to hurt their hands. This only aggravates Susan further, who raises her voice and demands to know if Lyanna understands her at all, insisting once more that an empress should not be doing this kind of work. At this point, Lyanna has had enough. She directly questions what Susan is trying to say and whether she is simply venting her frustration. She points out that if Susan is going to keep grumbling, she might as well use that time to reconcile with Carmine. She adds that it is only natural for people to work to make a living, and if Susan is to become a leader, she should lead by example. Susan is struck by these words, recalling how her brother once said something very similar, that leaders should eat less and work harder for their people. This realization leads her to understand, perhaps for the first time, why he has fallen for Lyanna. After a moment of silence, Susan abruptly asks Lyanna whether she loves her brother. The sudden question catches Lyanna off guard, leaving her confused about what prompted it. Susan begins to explain, speaking about how difficult their brother's life has been since childhood. She describes their grandfather as a strict and terrifying man. Lyanna asks if she is referring to their grandmother's former husband, and Susan confirms it. She explains that he particularly despised Liz, constantly nitpicking even the smallest things, and that their brother would always stand up for them, only to be scolded in return. Despite his tendency to nag and his rigid nature, Susan recalls how he never once held her back. Whether she wanted to learn horseback riding or begged for a wooden sword, he always supported her and encouraged her to pursue what she was good at. Reflecting on this, she realizes that she may have become overly sensitive without even noticing it. Turning to Lyanna, she offers an apology. Lyanna, in turn, reflects that this sounds exactly like Carmine. He has never once belittled her for being a farmer. She reassures Susan that everything is fine and remarks that Carmine is fortunate to have such kind siblings. She then shares her own past, explaining that when she was cast out of her home, no one came to her aid, not even her sisters. She describes how pitiful her life once was and how she used to believe that the world was something one had to navigate alone. However, when Germain told her that he would protect her, it surprised her deeply. Meeting him became a blessing in her life, and she now wishes to become that kind of person for him as well. Hearing this, Susan stands and sincerely asks Lyanna to take good care of her brother. She tells her that if she ever faces hardship, she should come to her as well, because they are going to become family. The word family fills Lyanna with warmth and happiness. The two of them clasp hands, promising that they will both do their best. Suddenly, a loud commotion interrupts the moment. Someone outside is shouting, demanding to be let in. The man is clad in armor, his presence imposing and urgent. Susan, startled, wonders what is happening. Soon after, the butler arrives and informs them that, for the time being, they must remain inside the greenhouse. Intruders are attempting to enter the estate without permission. Outside, their grandmother looks on with sharp displeasure, questioning the audacity of those who dare to force their way in. She wonders who they think they are and whether they are truly attempting to take Lyanna away by force, deeming such behavior utterly insolent. At that moment, Carmine arrives as well, his expressions serious. He states that bringing soldiers into another territory without permission is no different from declaring war. He turns to Lyanna and asks her to allow him to stay by her side, clearly concerned for her safety. However, their grandmother firmly refuses. She reminds him that this is her land and questions why the emperor should interfere. Moreover, she points out that he is currently Lyanna's lover and might act rashly in the heat of emotion. As the lord of this territory, she insists that she will handle the situation herself and asks him to trust her. Carmine reluctantly agrees but urges her to be careful. He warns her about the man outside, reminding her that he once abandoned his own daughter, calling her useless. Even if Lyanna were to forgive him someday, Carmine believes that such a man never truly will. The Duke addresses the grandmother, remarking that it has been quite some time since they last met. He then wonders aloud whether he should now address her as the lord of this place instead. Despite the fact that she was once the emperor's wife, she is now merely a ruler of a remote domain. The grandmother immediately perceives the mocking tone behind his words, recognizing it as typical arrogance from nobility. In response, she calmly reminds him that he is, after all, one of the strongest pillars of the central power, whereas she is nothing more than an old woman living in seclusion. She invites him to speak freely without restraint. The Duke dismisses the tension by claiming that he is merely joking and insists that he would never dare to show her such disrespect. The grandmother, unconvinced but composed, shifts the topic and questions what could have brought him all the way to such a countryside. He explains that he has come to express gratitude for her care of his daughter over the years. However, she corrects him, stating that it was never a matter of her taking care of the girl. Lyanna has always been intelligent and diligent, earning the affection of everyone in the estate. With the pawn castle no longer in use, there had been no particular reason for the Duke to concern himself with this place until now. The Duke, however, notices her composure and inwardly remarks upon her audacity in standing before him without hesitation. He then states his true purpose. He has come to take his daughter back. He demands to know where Lyanna is. The grandmother informs him that he is too late, as Lyanna recently expressed a desire to travel. Trusting her judgment, she provided her with a travel pass and allowed her to leave. The Duke immediately refutes this explanation, stating that there has been no record of anyone from this estate passing through nearby checkpoints. The grandmother speculates that Lyanna may have traveled farther than expected, but the Duke challenges this notion, questioning whether she truly believes that a girl who has barely traveled in her life could have gone so far on her own. His words prompt the grandmother to grow wary, and she begins to question what he is truly implying. Abandoning subtlety, the Duke speaks frankly. He reveals that His Highness, the Crown Prince, has grown deeply suspicious of Lyanna and has begun to see through the facade of the so-called saintly woman. The grandmother questions whether he truly believes that Lyanna still wishes to become the Crown Prince's wife. The Duke responds that regardless of her wishes, it is the duty of her parents to guide and persuade their child toward what they deem to be happiness. He uses the grandmother herself as an example, suggesting that by following her own heart, she ended up as nothing more than a pitiful ruler of a remote land. Although she obtained the divorce she desired, her life did not turn out as happily as she might have hoped. She lost the ability to live alongside her children and grandchildren, and those aware of her circumstances regard her with quiet humiliation. The grandmother listens without anger, then counters his argument with calm conviction. She acknowledges that persuading children for their happiness may sound noble, but she questions whether he truly observed Lyanna's condition when he last saw her. From her perspective, Lyanna appeared genuinely happy and content with her current life. She reflects that living according to one's own will does not always guarantee happiness, yet it ensures a life without regret. This, she implies, is a lesson many parents claim to teach their children. She further urges him to leave Lyanna alone, asserting that what he calls a parent's duty is not necessarily what will bring the girl true happiness. The Duke internally dismisses her words as nonsense. He cannot comprehend how a girl who once lived in luxury as the daughter of a duke could possibly be content in such modest circumstances. To him, her happiness is irrelevant. Given everything she has received as his daughter, he believes she is obligated to obey her parents, regardless of her personal desires. In his mind, it is her unquestionable duty to serve her family.